Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled are artist Frederick Eversley and actor-writer Ron Marasco. Artist Fred Eversley came to Los Angeles in 1963 with a degree in engineering from Carnegie Mellon University. He had plans to go to med school.
And a fellowship.
And a fellowship too.
And the world's biggest fellowship ever given.
That career path never happened. He met artists Via Selmans, Judy Chicago, Tony Berlant, and Nancy Gowans, who became his girlfriend and whom he helped perfect her MFA work at UCLA. He worked with artist Charles Maddox and moved from photography to fantastic plastic. I think that's his fantastic plastic. The rest is history. Fred has had one-man shows all over the world in U.S. museums, very important museums, and we were together in Berlin where he had some of his work at the Getty PST show. So let's go back to the Venice days and give me a quick 65 to 75, those 10 years when you were in transition becoming a plastic artist.
65 to 75. 65, I was still very much an engineer. I worked for Wiley Labs in El Segundo. Frank Wiley had brought me to California, I thought for a very short time, and ended up for a longer time. In January 67, I had an automobile accident, a very serious one. It did two things. It put me on crutches for a year and it gave me a permanent deferment from Vietnam. My job was keeping me out of the Army, yes.
But were you doing photography then?
I had always done photography since I was 5, 6 years old. My grandfather was a fairly famous experimenter, as they were called in those days, in photography.
Oh, I see. So it was kind of in your DNA.
Photography and electronics.
Electronics, I mean.
My grandfather was also very into electronics, and my father was a very famous jet fighter designer.
It seems like the furthest thing, the engineering from art, and yet science and art are like this, aren't they?
They can be.
Or they can be.
Actually, while I was still an engineer, there was a group that Charles Maddox started called the Aesthetic Research Center, which was modeled after the New York group EAT, which Rauschenberg had started with Billy Kluver. I joined the group as a technologist. And
so you were using your expertise with that group.
I was using my expertise with that group. I didn't get to use it very much because the artist I was assigned to was my girlfriend's best girlfriend, or ex-best girlfriend, Judy Garowitz, now known as Judy Chicago.
That was your ex-girlfriend's girlfriend?
Nancy Gowans had been prior to me, had been married to Lloyd Hamrow.
Okay.
Nancy and Lloyd got divorced. I joined Nancy, and Lloyd married Judy.
I got it. This is the best. You're the best at keeping this tree of life, and you were there for every one of these things. Okay, go on.
And I met my girlfriend on a rooftop party that Via Selmans threw in her studio, which is opposite the Venice Police Station. This was 65.
Yeah. So you met them. You met Tony Berlant at that time.
Tony was teaching in the classroom next to Nancy at UCLA.
I see. So they were all getting their masters.
They all were in the same graduating master's class at UCLA.
Yeah,
Tony, Judy, Randy Sandel, who's still showing very much here, and Susan Titleman.
Oh, Susan Titleman, married to Ry Cooder.
Right.
So you were hanging...
And Susan was actually a studio mate of mine for 6 months.
She was a great painter, wasn't she?
No, she was making ceramic
I thought
sculptor.
she was painting.
No, ceramic sculptor.
Oh.
And she was the girlfriend of the head of sculpture, Oliver Andrews.
See, you have it. You have it all down.
It was all very incestuous.
Yes, it certainly was. But that was what was going on in the art scene. It was very friendly, very close-knit. Things have changed.
Things have very much changed, yes, absolutely.
But you weren't really any more educated than they. They were all getting their masters, right? Or they had gotten their masters, and you had...
And I was just my little bachelor in engineering. I'm the least educated of all of them in a way.
But in a different...
In a different field. I'm the least educated person in my family. Everyone in my family has a PhD except me.
You have a PhD in resin.
I have a PhD in resin.
Isn't that right?
In life.
So they were very close.
Charlie Maddox invited me to share his studio for free in return for helping him engineer his sculpture. And so I was happily in Charlie's studio, and then actually Charlie went for a couple of years down to New Mexico to teach. So I basically had his whole studio to myself. Immediately next door to me was Eric Orr. Next to Eric was McCracken, and next to McCracken was Altoon.
And all three of them are gone.
And all three of them are gone. I'm the only survivor of Rappakinney.
And you stayed in John's studio?
I moved into John's studio a week after he died.
Which was in the 60s, right?
69.
Yeah, oh.
I've been there ever since.
And you're still there. So what went on in that studio? Did you start making, and how did it progress?
Well, I started making the sculpture when I was still in Charlie Maddox's studio.
But when you got into your own studio?
I just had more space, and it meant I could live in my studio instead of living in my apartment in Venice. And shortly after that, I started getting into a lot of group shows that all the plastic people were in. The most famous was called the Plastic Presence, that was organized by the Milwaukee Art Museum and went to the Jewish Museum in New York and San Francisco Museum. But there were also smaller shows, one organized by Cal Arts and one organized by Cal State, and a few more. So we were all, every one of us, 40 people, 30 people, were in the exact same group shows. There were about 8 or 10 of those group shows around town.
And you were friendly, working together, seeing each other? Yes, definitely.
Absolutely, very friendly.
The major thing was the Whitney show.
The major thing was Rauschenberg advised me. Bob Rauschenberg was out here working at Gemini, doing his thought, and he advised me, forget the LA art scene, go straight to New York. And I went to New York, and in fact, he specifically sent me to see Betty Parsons. Betty Parsons was not interested in showing my work, but she loved my work, so she bought 2 pieces for her own collection. That was my first New York collector. And from there, I went to Castelli. This is all in the same day, one day. I went to Castelli. I met the guy who eventually started OK House 8 months later, 10 months later. And he said, Castelli will love your work, but he's not going to offer you anything. Castelli loved my work, but didn't offer me anything. He said, come see me in a year because I'm opening my own gallery in Soho. I thanked him. I walked 2 blocks to Robert Elkine Gallery. Elkine loved my piece and took 1 piece on consignment. I walked 2 more blocks to the Whitney, and Marcia Tucker invited me up.
The great Marcia Tucker.
The great Marcia
Tucker. I adore
Tucker.
Marcia Tucker.
She loved the work, and she called the entire senior staff in, the other 3 curators, the director and the deputy director. They all loved the work. And the next day, they invited me to have a one-man show at the Whitney if I could be ready.
That's unbelievable. And from that point, because that is very historic, we went into a lot of commissions. This was the first?
No, my first commissions were indoor commissions, very large plastic pieces. John Jurdy, the architect John Jurdy, commissioned me to make a piece for his shopping center in Atlanta, Lenox Square. And then Al Taubman, who ended up commissioned me to make a piece for his shopping center in San Jose. So I've done 2 indoor 8-foot plastic pieces.
Right.
That piece, I heard about this commission, which is in Miami, the day before the judging. I'm sitting in LA, And I heard about it through the grapevine, and I called the woman who was head of art and public places in Miami early on a Thursday, and she said, I didn't know you made outdoor sculpture. I said, well, I haven't yet, but I want to make outdoor sculpture. And she said, well, we'll put you on the list. I said, what about for this project? She said, it's impossible. There's no way I can even get you the plans, the site pictures, anything. I said, what if I just made a design without seeing the location? And she said, well, how are you going to get it here? How are you going to take pictures and make drawings and get them here?
Right.
It's at 10 o'clock in the morning, Fred. That's tomorrow. And so less than 24 hours.
You
So
jumped?
I made a model. I jumped on a plane. I flew to Miami. I arrived at 7 o'clock in the morning. I went straight to the office. I was there 8:45. She walked up and recognized me because she had been to the Museum of Modern Art, which is where I knew her. She said, are you absolutely crazy? She said, let me see. And my model was this big.
For how big is the piece?
40 feet.
40 feet.
But it was, and it was in plastic, covered with aluminum foil to make it look metallic. She said, I love the concept, but, oh my God, Fred. She said, okay, you're here. Fill out the paperwork. And then she said, as long as you're here, will you help me bring out the models? I mean,
yeah.
and this competition had been going on for 2.5 years. It was the biggest competition ever.
But
right?
see, this story is great for artists to hear because there's always a way.
Oh, yeah.
There's always a way, and I think that you're proving that there's always a way. And you got the commission.
Against all odds, because I was against everyone from Louise Nevelson to Don Judd to, I mean, every name you can name, because it was the largest commission ever given out south of Washington, D.C.
Is that right? I wanted you to just mention what these are so we can just show these pictures. Just tell us what this is.
A piece constructed of alternating steel and acrylic triangles. The acrylic triangles each act as a prism.
This way. And
that was from a museum show in 1985 in Miami.
in Miami. Okay, the other thing that I just put down here, and we want to get...
That is
the
one of my early plastic lenses. Actually, that is not a super early one. That is a 1980s lens as opposed to a 1970s lens, which are 3-color.
I hate to say our time has run out, but that's what I wanted you to... That's what I wanted to rush through this wonderful work that you did.
That's too short.
So thank you, Fred.
You're welcome.
You're
welcome.
Thank you. And don't you go away because we have the second part of this show coming on, and it's Ron Marasco. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Actor, director, author Ron Marasco, who studied at the Moscow Theater at Fordham University and has an MA and PhD from UCLA, is our guest today. Ron is a theater professor at Loyola Marymount University. You've seen him in LA and New York stage productions, in big screen films like 40-Year-Old Virgin and Freaks and Geeks, and a lot of top TV series like The West Wing, Murphy Brown, The X-Files, you name it, he's probably been on it. He's the author of Notes to an Actor and co-author of About Grief, not Grease, Grief. He won an award for the Screenplay of Illusion, which was connected the project to Michael Gurdjieff and Kirk Douglas. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was one of the great experiences of my life to be, first of all, we had a number of days working with Kirk Douglas at his home, rehearsing with him, which was just fantastic. And then working on this film. I don't know that he had done an independent film like this. There was just something about the script that I think appealed to him. But you're really across from an extraordinary man, not just because he's famous and a legend and one of these people who is up on the Hollywood murals when they make them, but also what he is, I think, just as a being, as an actor. When you're across from another actor, you can really feel their soul sometimes if the actor's really good. And you could definitely feel that with him. He's a great man.
I saw that with you when I saw the play, Grace
really?
Notes. Yes, I saw that
Thank
in
you.
the way you were acting, because you were acting and you were like directing at the same time. You were like so a part of it. But that's an aside. Let's go back. So I want to go back and finish. Michael Gurdjieff was on the
Michael Gurdjieff, who's an actor and a wonderful director, and I had done a number of projects with Mike, both on the stage, directed him and was in a play with Mike on the stage. And Illusion is just a marvelous, it's a beautiful, beautiful movie about a man who was a Hollywood legend, played by Kirk Douglas, and I play an editor who comes back, who's dead, and comes back as a ghost, and tries to save him the way, as you, I'm sure, know from here, editors save you.
That's right.
And so I played his editor.
They think they say that.
And it was a marvelous experience to be across from that sort of a soul.
You talk about that, but and the involvement you had with this great actor of our time. But you've been on the stage so much and you've done so much work. How can you do that and teach at LMU? You're like in the big department there.
I'm a tenured professor at LMU, and it's a somewhat divided life. I've always had that. I really, there's two places on this earth that I love, kinds of places. Well, three really. One is a theater of any kind. And the other, I really do love a university. I love being on a campus. I love the life force of it. The other thing I was going to say was a cafe, but a university is a cafe, and they're very similar to me. The theater and university, in that they're places where there is a life force happening, where a lot has happened in these places, and you can feel the good ghosts of that and the great energy. And it's as I said, it's a divided life in some ways, because I've lived in both ways.
I wondered about that, because I know James Seamus, who's at Focus Films in New York, also teaches at Columbia. And I wonder why he's like the head of this big company. Why is he at Columbia? But he loves the student exchange.
Well, and I think just talking, in a lot of ways, teaching is learning out loud.
I was wondering, do you learn too from them?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, one of the main things you learn from them is what's going on in the world, because they see it more than you can. So you definitely keep abreast of that. But also, I think you're also trying to be good at anything is about having a certain standard. As much as it's about any kind of a technique that you have. It's a standard. Standard is technique, having a standard. And when you teach, you have to have that. And so you say to yourself, look, if I say this, if I go out and do it, if I go out and act, I better try to be doing what I'm asking my students to do.
I can back it up, right.
You know.
Amazing Grace, you're going to produce that?
Yes, this is no, I'm not producing it. It's a movie that I wrote with Brian Schuff,
with
who is
Brian
my
Schuff.
co-author on this and the play. And it's going to be directed by Mike Gurdjieff.
Oh, it is?
It's for Hay House Productions.
So it just continues, the work, the respect, friendship, and the respect for one another. You talked about the university and teaching, and you wrote Notes to an Actor.
Yeah, that was the first book I wrote.
Is it a required reading? Is it a
not really.
textbook?
I mean, I could make it that, but in some of my most everybody that ends up working with me will certainly go get the book. I've never been great at, walking around with books and passing them out. But
I meant at other universities too.
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah, so they use it everywhere.
Well, I don't know everywhere, but
well,
certainly.
but I mean they do use it.
It's a pretty blunt, plain-spoken book.
Well, just take us through a couple of ideas from it.
Well, one of the chapters is it's 8 chapters, and one of the chapters is called Greatness. Mm-hmm. Because I think there's a big difference between a good actor and a great actor. And I think there's a lot of good actors, and a lot of them could be great, but they sort of level off at the level of good.
But they can still keep working.
And they still keep working, and people respect them, but then there are those people that really do what I call change the room. And those are the magicians. And I think there are many actors that are always aspiring to that. And actors will know what I mean when I say the difference between good and great. So I did a chapter on greatness and what I think the greats are doing versus what just a good actor's doing.
You talked about Grief, which is the book we have here that you wrote with Brian Schuff. How did you research it?
I research it the way I research anything, which is thinking, doodling, reading, and talking. It wasn't done in any purposeful way where we did transcripts of interviews. We talked about things
with each other or with other people?
With other people. First of all, I'm a big reader, and so I read everything I can get my hands on, and read eclectically, not just from one area. I read a lot. There's a lot in the book and in the play that's from poetry, from literature, from a lot of different places.
Yes.
I'm kind of get a lot of newspapers and magazines and journals and that I try to keep up on. And but we just talked with people, and almost everybody. Look, I know that you're wearing, because you told me, the sweater that was your mother's.
That's right. And it really came out of going to the play,
Right.
Grace Notes.
So that's how we wrote it, by knowing things like that,
Oh,
by
I
hearing
see.
this kind of a thing, that you said, this sweater is my mother's and it
Right.
means something.
Right.
That's how we wrote the
Right.
book, by that kind of conversation.
But how do you think you could take a book about grief and make it into a play that's at the Odyssey Theater, sitting in a room at a table with 3 actors, you being one and the director, and talking?
Well, you're always looking for where is the drama in anything. And a lot of times it's between the actors, of course, on the stage. In this case, I think the drama of this project, this performance piece, which is called Grace Notes and Anvils, that's at the
Right.
Odyssey, it's between the saying and the not saying. That moment of saying things and letting those people in the audience hear. He just mentioned how odd it is after someone dies, how odd and meaningful their eyeglasses are, for example. And you can feel that there are some people in the audience that go, huh,
Can you feel it?
absolutely, you can feel it. You can feel that they know what you're talking about. When you say something that they recognize as funny, when you say something that they recognize as aggravating, you can feel that. And it began by us just reading from the book in a room of people, and we thought, something's happening here.
Oh, you read from the book, and then it came on stage.
Yeah.
I mean, then it became
You
a
could
play.
feel that in the room there was a feeling I hadn't felt in a theater setting before.
You changed About Grief to Grace Notes and
Anvils.
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 What are Grace Notes?
Well, Grace Notes are those extraordinary little touches that people do that are very helpful to someone in grief, and they won't be the people that you expect. A lot of times the people you thought you could depend on, you can't. But there are some people that are really emotionally intelligent, and they come through for you, and there are moments of grace, moments of feeling a great connection to somebody in a very deep way, and they are there.
But that's what
for
I
people in
loved,
grief.
because you read some Grace Notes, and then after you do it, you go, Grace Note, Grace Note.
Yeah.
Which is really beautiful, because it makes it come to you. Then an anvil, which
An
everyone
anvil
hits us
is
over the head.
when you don't expect it and your eye falls on something, and you say, "Oh, that piece of carpeting over there reminds me of the piece of carpeting that was in my grandfather's apartment," and I'm on a show and I see the carpeting and I'm hit by it emotionally.
Oh,
These
I thought
flowers.
it was like a mean
I had
thing.
these flowers in my house in New Jersey, and when you hit them, they would pop sometimes.
Yeah.
And now that's not particularly an anvil for me, but when I lived in New Jersey, we had flowers like this, and you might see that at a certain time, and have it hit you very hard.
Oh, hitting you hard like that, because one of the
It's
things
related to someone you lost.
you have a rotating group of actors. You stay the same because
Yeah.
you're the director, and I can
Well,
see
I'm
you
just-
going,
yeah.
you open your book and then you go like this, and I love it because it's like kind of like directing on stage. But Morgan Fairchild.
Morgan Fairchild just closed, and she was
And who else?
such a delight to be around and know, and so smart and insightful. Coming in is Jenny O'Hara.
Yes, I've
And,
seen her on stage. She's fantastic.
Fantastic.
And who have you had before?
Before, the person that opened it was a wonderful actress named Roxanne Hart.
Oh, she's great too. I've had her on
Did
the
a
show.
beautiful job.
She's great.
But they're all different. And then coming up will be Susan Sullivan.
She's fantastic.
We've been very fortunate. Peter Matjes, who's done our casting for us, Jonelle Allen, Deirdre Hall.
Oh dear.
And
Really?
Marriott Hartley. I just got off the phone with
she's
Marriott Hartley.
fantastic.
And she's had a lot of experience with the Foundation of Suicide.
Yes, because she's been on the show too.
And done tremendous work, so we just got her aboard.
Oh, that's great. Then what about the men?
The men first, it opened with Brian Schuff, and now Wes Ramsey is doing it. Two wonderful young actors, one named Ricardo Molina, and an actor we just brought aboard who's named Carl Glossman, and he just did a play and is a New York actor, just came out to LA, so this will be his first thing. Just worked with him last night. He's quite terrific. And then at the end of the run, Brendan Barash, who's a television actor.
So that's fantastic. But one of the anvils I thought was when Morgan Fairchild said she was at the funeral of her father, and one of her old friends came and said, "You look haggard."
Yeah.
And she's like, "How am I supposed to look?" Right?
Well, you'll see this. You're very exposed when you're in grief, and so everything is more. So the kindly things that people do hit you in a way that is piercingly beautiful, and the difficult things, the heavy things, really, really slam you. So that openness, that being exposed, that happens for a long period of time for people in grief.
And how did you bring in all the poetry? And there's so many authors and poets that
It's
you name.
just a part of my life. I don't ever go fishing for them. Either they pop up and they come into your mind, or they don't.
like Auden, my east, my west. I mean, those
my
things
north,
are,
he was my north, my south, my east, my west.
You start crying when you
My
hear this.
working week, my Sunday rest.
The best.
And that right there, that encapsulates a life. Your working week and your Sunday rest.
And it encapsulates the play. I hope everyone goes to see it, because one of the things that you said is there's a dividing line, and everything is on one side or the other side of the grief you've
when you have that
experienced.
date. It's just like America. For us, it's September 11th, and we
Right.
all know what that date means.
Right.
But many people have their own September 11th, where it was life before it was different than life after it.
And just to sum it up, I think one of the great lines was that love builds a wall around you.
This
and
is
that's what
E.E.
you
Cummings
thought.
said, my love is building a building around you.
Yes.
And people have felt this about the play. They feel that you're in a room with people that understand there's a lot of laughter during the play, a lot of laughter. And I think we wanted it to be what the theater can be, this communal, healing, connecting experience that you can't get on a computer. You've got to be in the room.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joan. It's been
Thank
nice
you.
being here.
Keep emailing JAQUINN1 at AOL.com. See you next time on the Joan Quinn